Podcast Answer Man, episode number 148. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Podcast Answer Man. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and today, believe it or not, I'm only going to be talking about one thing. That's right. Those of you who have been listening all along and listened to my teaser from last week, episode 147, you've been waiting for my super secret interviewing people by telephone device that I wanted to tell you about. All right, so I'm not going to make you wait until the end of the episode or anything like that. Like I said, today is going to be a shorter episode of Podcast Answer Man, but this episode, I can guarantee you, will make up for the length of it with the just, as Daniel in our chat room would say, with the pure awesomeness of this episode. All right, so a couple things here. One of the things that people want to do on a consistent basis, as far as questions I get, is how do I bring in telephone calls into my podcast? You know, I record this show. We want to be able to take live calls via the telephone, and how can I bring those in? And for the longest time, I tried to create ways of doing this without buying any kind of expensive equipment, to say the least. So first and foremost, I will tell you, back in the early days when I was just doing this as a hobby, I did something really weird. I took a headset of a phone and I took a pair of headphones and I took the mouthpiece of the headphones and duct taped it to the mouthpiece. So the headphones was, or the mouthpiece of the telephone was duct tape to a headphones, one of the headphones, I guess one like the left or the right channel. It doesn't matter. But anyway, I tried to do that, and that of course would take whatever is coming out of my mixer, the same things I'm hearing in my own headphones. The person on the telephone would hear. So basically, what's going on is my voice would be traveling out of the mixer into the headphones, and then into the mouthpiece of a telephone. And then what I did is I tried taking a cheap microphone and I duct taped the cheap microphone to where the microphone is butted up right up against over the earpiece. And of course, I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be great. And I'll tell you what, I'll save you the trouble. Don't try it. It doesn't work. All right. There are problems. Number one, the most important problem here with a standard telephone, just your standard telephone, I want you to do this. If you have a regular landline telephone, I want you to pick it up and I want you to call somebody. And then when you're talking and holding the phone up to your ear, I want you to notice something that you may not have noticed before. And that is, when you're talking, you actually hear your voice in your ear. So basically what's going on is the standard telephone line, when you are holding and listening to a headset, it is actually mixing both your voice and the caller's voice and playing that back to you in the earpiece. And so your voice is there. So basically what would happen is I would be sending my voice, I would actually send my voice from my microphone. It was going into my headphones, it was going into the microphone, and then it was immediately coming out of the earpiece and sending it back. And guess what you get? You have a very loud, high-pitched feedback noise. So that was not good at all. All right, so then I went over to Radio Shack. And in essence, what happened is I found that there are all kinds of these things. Back then they called them, oh gosh, what did they call those devices? Because they had a really bad name. It was like wire tapping or phone tapping devices. And so you could get these phone tapping devices, and they had all kinds of different sorts. Some of them plug into the telephone line. Some of them plug into the, have a little suction cup to suck the audio out of what's coming through the headphone. It's just really weird stuff. Anyway, I tried using those kind of devices just to record the audio. And what I found is that, when you're doing that, it's still mixing both my voice and the other voice. And it was possible to record the conversation, but my voice didn't sound as good. My voice, I've got the high LPR 40. I want to sound like I'm in studio for everything that I say, but I only want the person on the phone to sound like they're on the phone. So I was doing things, crazy stuff like I was recording that entire conversation using that device, and I would record myself locally, and then I would do, after the fact, I would actually patch the two audio files together and delete all the bits and pieces where the other recording had my voice only in the lower quality. I would just delete all of that out and just keep the caller's voice. You talk about a lot of post-production. It was horrible. So in essence, what I did is I decided I'm going to look and see, what kind of hardware is out there. Well, there are a lot of professional pieces of equipment out there. The most popular places two most popular companies are Telos, Telos, and JK Audio. All right, jkaudio.com. And so those are the places that I looked. And one night I was listening to Leo Laporte, and he was talking about the fact that he uses a broadcast host by JK Audio. And so I started looking at it, and I'm looking at the price of this. And it's like, man, that's pretty expensive. You got to imagine, this was back when I was doing this just as a hobby. And I'm thinking, man, that's pretty expensive. But when he explained to me why he uses that device and why it's necessary to digitally separate the caller's voice from your voice being sent, and what it does is it allows you to just only bring in the voice of the caller into your mixer. And so therefore you don't have to, it actually digitally separates your voice out of the mix or out of the signal. And I'm like, that's exactly what I need. And so I thought that that's what I needed. So I went in, and then I was looking at their website, and I noticed they had this thing called the inline patch, and it's like a lot cheaper. And I'm like, well, why can't that work? And so I called JK Audio up, and I said, why can't I get this? This is what I'm trying to do. Why can't I just use the inline patch? It says like, it seems like it's going to do it. And she says, well, you could try that, and if you wanted to. But the problem you might run into is the fact that it's not digitally separating, but there is a decibel separation between the two. So basically, your voice is still going to be audible on the caller phone line, but your voice is going to be a lot lower. There's going to be a decreased decibel volume level from your voice compared to your caller. And I'm like, oh, well, that's still not what I want, because I don't want any of my voice to come in through the caller's phone line. And she says, then you need a digital hybrid, one that's going to digitally separate this. And so, lo and behold, I ended up getting a digital hybrid, a JK Audio digital hybrid. I've had it for years now, and it does a wonderful job. It allows me to take in live calls. And in fact, a lot of people say, Cliff, how do you do these live calls? How do you take these, do these telephone interviews? And so I've, over the years, and of course now, I'm doing this full time, and I sell equipment, do consulting. I've had a lot of people buy the broadcast host from me. They say, Cliff, I want to be able to do what you're doing. And so a lot of people have bought the broadcast host, and I never really considered anything else outside of the fact that I tried 1,000,001 different ways. And I mean, I didn't even tell you that one time I actually went and got a phone cord, and I decided, I'm going to try to create my own little device. It was a failure. I know that there are ways that I could try to do this myself, but the fact is that the broadcast host works. I've already got it. Why mess with anything else? So yeah, that's pretty much to date. That's really been the way that I tell people that I do my interviews, and a lot of people just duplicate that. Now, when people ask me, Cliff, how do I bring telephone calls into my podcast? I want to let you know, and so I mentioned this last week. I said, I'm going to share with you an awesome way, a totally revolutionary, awesome way that, what people have probably figured out well before I ever figured it out, and before it was brought up by our caller today. But this is new to me. It's like, well, how did I not think about this? But to be honest with you, I've always tried it so many ways with a landline phone where my voice is also coming through the earpiece, that I just assumed that it was that way on the other method as well. I don't want to give away the secret sauce. So I'm going to get to it, but I want to finish telling you the story. So, when I shared last week that I was going to tell you a way to do this without buying a $459 piece of equipment from me, some people say, well, gosh, Cliff, there goes the sales of your broadcast host. And I said, well, maybe. And I want to tell you when people say, Cliff, I want to do telephone interviews and I want to use the same gear that you do, and I ask them what, I'm always conscious of what other people's budgets are, and I want to make sure that they know that there are options outside of buying a nearly $500 piece of equipment. So I say, let me explain to you the three main options that you can do to bring a telephone call into your podcast recording. And so I said, number one, I'm just going to tell you that I use the broadcast host. And I explained to him, I talked to him about the fact that, it's a landline telephone that I use. The phone number, it's pretty reliable. I've never had a disconnection as a result of using this. And, the quality is consistent from call to call to call. There's no real issue whatsoever in using this. But I also talk about the fact that, when you use a digital hybrid, you're bringing in the telephone line and you're amplifying it. And if there's any static in the phone line, I tell them all the benefits and the drawbacks of having a JK audio device, which costs, which I sell for $459. So, I said, now that's one option. So let me tell you about the other two options for bringing in telephone calls or recording interviews with people. A second option is to use a telephone conference bridge. You could use a service. I use TalkShoe. That's the place that I call or to use if I'm going to do a conferenced phone call. And what you can do is you can invite many people to call in to TalkShoe.com, and you can call in to TalkShoe.com. And basically you can have TalkShoe.com record the entire conversation. Now and I say that the benefit is that everybody just dials in, and the other benefit is that it records the call for you, and you can download that recording after the fact, and you can do whatever you want with it. And you could even do the whole scenario where you record yourself locally and then go replace any place where it recorded you talking and take that out of their recording, and then only leave the other people who talked during the call in the on that side of the recording, and then you kind of mimic what I'm doing with the broadcast host without any post-production work. I said, but you could, if you wanted to, you could actually just take the recording and make that your episode. Maybe I would suggest at the very minimum, kind of saying, doing your full studio quality music in the front, and then come in with your studio microphone sound like I am now and say, hey, everybody, today I'm going to be playing an interview. Now, this interview was done in a phone conference call, so it's going to sound like a telephone conversation, and it is, and blah, blah, blah. But I'd at least open it up with your good quality audio. And then you could just play the recording straight from TalkShoe, just plop that into your episode, and then at the end you can come in your studio sound and say, hey, that was the interview, blah blah blah, and then play your music, close it out. So that said, that's option two. You could, and by the way, that solution, it's free, and you don't have to use TalkShoe. You can use, there's a ton of different conference calling bridges out there that are free, all of which will record your calls, and stuff like that. The drawbacks is that the quality is not always great. The other drawbacks are the fact that, maybe you have a TalkShoe service and you've got it scheduled for this time, and you go to the website and TalkShoe's down, and that's been known to happen from time to time with TalkShoe, is that their service is not, they don't have a guaranteed uptime reliability. And so, you might have 3 or 4% of the time that the site's just not available for whatever reason. And, and whatever the case may be. Plus, you also have to have people dial in versus you calling them. There's some drawbacks. So I talked to my clients about that as an option. And then I said, then I've always said, there is a third option. A third option is to use Skype. Now, I will tell you that Skype is a great service. In fact, I use it all the time for co-hosting. That, I love, if I were giving the option to talk with somebody from Skype to Skype, meaning that they have Skype on their computer and I have Skype on my computer, or doing a telephone interview with that person, I would prefer Skype almost all the time. Did you catch the word almost all the time? And I say that because sometimes Skype connections are really, really bad. There's a lot of reasons why it could be bad, such as, low bandwidth on the other person. Perhaps they don't have a microphone and they're using an internal microphone and it just sounds horrendous. There's a whole lot of other reasons, not to mention the fact that Skype sometimes just isn't the most reliable service out there. And so again, I said, now what you can do is you can use Skype and have this Skype out service. This is where it allows you to dial a landline telephone from Skype. And basically, since you already have a computer, you can bring all this stuff in and out. Just a couple cables, you could forgo buying a nearly $500 piece of equipment and use Skype, and you dial out via Skype to the telephone line, and then that person, doesn't even know necessarily that you've called them from Skype. It's just like a phone call to them, but you're bringing them in. Now, you could even, and they say, well, that's if you call them. What if they want to call you? Well, even with Skype, you can purchase a phone number that people dial from landline telephones, and it calls your Skype account. So, I mean, Skype is a really viable option. It's not always the best audio quality. I mean, number one, it is voice over IP, so it's not like, there is some degradation of the audio signal, and not to mention the fact that the telephone call is already a very low quality audio signal. So it's not the best option, but there are certainly some benefits. And the benefits of the other two options outside the broadcast host is obviously price. And if that's your biggest concern right now is the budget end of things, then one of those two options would probably be a good solution for you. And so you can see that as a podcast consultant, and even one who sells equipment to clients and makes a profit from doing so, you can see that my number one desire is not just to make a sale. I mean, it is just not within me. It's like I want people to know the options. I want my clients to know what I know and what I would want to know. And of course, as I've mentioned here, I've tried many times to try to find ways to do it without buying the broadcast host, and I ended up buying the broadcast host. And I will tell you, I do not regret having the broadcast host, even with what I'm about ready to tell you. All right, even with the information that I'm about ready to share with you. Now, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to take this and I'm going to now tell you that from this point forward, for most people, or maybe not most people, but for a lot of my clients, there is now, in my mind, a fourth option. That's right, a fourth option. And I'm just like kicking myself. How did I not think about this earlier? All right, so before I go any further, I'm just going to play a call that came in on the Podcast Answer Man listener line, and this is what came in.
Cliff, this is G. Ron Cohn from Aurora, Colorado. I wanted to get your input on phone call integration. I do 4 podcasts a week, and one of them, my Propel podcast, has a lot of overseas guests that I conference in for interviews. And so a few months ago, I got into the habit of integrating calls with the iPhone because I can just conference calls right into the 1/8-inch jack into my mixer. But I've never used Skype, and I've wondered if the quality would be better than the iPhone's digital signal. So I was kind of curious on what you would suggest if quality of the signal was the only criteria. Would love to hear your opinion. Thanks.
All right. So G. Ron Cohen, and thank you for calling in, by the way. And he's sitting here asking, what about this broadcast host, or what other solutions are out there? Would it be better than bringing the audio in from the iPhone, headphone jack? And I'm like, wait a second. I've never tried that. I wonder how that works. And, well, what do you think I did? Immediately upon hearing that, I'm like, okay, let's give this a shot. And so I'm going to play for you, let me explain to you what I did. First and foremost. Now, the iPhone has a standard 1/8-inch headphone jack, just like now it has the ability to take a 3, it has the ability to do just both headphones and a microphone if you have the right, for example, if you have the earbuds that come with your iPhone, there's the mic port on there as well. But the thing is I actually plugged in a cable that I normally would plug in. Like, for example, I have a cable that I plug into my MacBook. Sometimes I play audio off of my MacBook, and it just sticks into the headphones jack of the MacBook, and I bring that into one of the channels of the mixers. So I'm sitting there, I get this voicemail, and then I unplug that 1/8-inch jack out of the headphones jack of my MacBook, and I plug it into the headphones jack of my iPhone. And then I pick up the phone and I dialed my wife and just held the phone I had it sitting on the table in front of me. And I called my wife, and this is what I got. Okay, so I have Stephanie, my lovely wife, on the phone. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Doing very good. Hey, I'm testing out something new here in the studio. Somebody called in and said that they've been using their iPhone to make calls for interviews, and I never really thought of doing this before, but it basically what I'm doing is I'm plugging in the 1/8 inch jack on something I would normally plug into like a Skype computer, and I'm bringing the audio from the iPhone into the mixer board, and it's coming through loud and clear. Say something again.
There was something again. What? I hate when you put me on the spot like that.
I know.
You should ask me a question.
All right. So, Stephanie, what's the weather like outside?
It's very white.
Very white. So,
very white.
So the audio's coming in. It's sounding really good. All right. So there you go. I'm not going to play the entire conversation that I had with my wife, but you could hear me. Or you could hear me in studio quality, obviously. And then I just plugged in the headphones jack, and you did not hear my voice when I was talking because it's like it just occurred to me. You know what? When I talk on my iPhone, the iPhone is not taking what I'm speaking into the phone and also putting it into my headphones or into the earpiece if I'm holding it up to my ears or up to my ear. And so all of a sudden it's like, wait a second. This is awesome. So what I could do, basically, if you plug in headphones, not your earbuds, but if you just plug in a regular pair of ear headphones into the headphones jack, you can hold your iPhone up and the microphone is still activated. As long as you're only plugging in a headphones jack into the top, plug into the top, it does not deactivate the microphone that's on your iPhone. The iPhone microphone, by the way, is very, very sensitive. It basically picks up great audio. So what I was doing there is I literally just set my iPhone right down in front of me on the table, and I was talking directly into my Heil microphone while my phone sitting on the table in front of me was just picking up my voice from me simply talking in the room. And my wife says she heard me perfectly, just as though I was talking to her as any other time on my iPhone. And well, you guys got to hear her voice. So it's like, wow, this is amazing. Now, the question is, what? It's like all of a sudden it's like, okay, does this mean that people are no longer going to buy the broadcast host? Well, it may mean that some people may not. Here's the reason why. If you want to bring in telephone calls into your, if you want to bring telephone calls into your podcast, and you have an iPhone, either a 3G or 3GS, which, by the way, don't even try this with the original iPhone. The reason why is because the original iPhone has that kind of edge connection, that thing that goes on there, and it's really, really bad. And you get that whatever that sound is, it would just be horrible. But on the 3G, on my 3G and Stephanie's 3GS, we don't get that little interference sound at all. So I know it works great on both the iPhone and the iPhone 3GS. I'm sorry, the iPhone 3G and 3GS. I'm not sure how it works on your Droids or the other phones out there. I would assume that some of them work great, but if you have if you have a phone that doesn't cause that interference noise when it's connected, then this could work for you as well, possibly, as long as the audio from your microphone on the phone is not fed through the headphones. And so if you have the ability to connect headphones up to your mixer through whatever cable, then this would work for you. And it actually sounded pretty darn good. You heard the conversation that I had with Stephanie there. It sounds really good. Now, what are some of the drawbacks of this? Well, sometimes, who's still going to buy a broadcast host? Well, I can think of a couple people still that would buy the broadcast host. Number one, people who don't have unlimited minutes or something like that. Maybe you don't know how long the phone call could be. So, you're on the cell phone, it does take up your minutes. That's becoming less and less of a problem these days. You get the unlimited plan, or you get unlimited nights and weekends. You schedule your interview at night. There's a lot of ways to get around that. The other thing is what's the reliability of your signal? And of course, that's why Ron Cohen is calling in and saying, hey, how's this? And it's like, listen, if you don't have a problem with the quality and you can hear the person on the other line, I don't know that really, the call that I just played for you with Stephanie from the iPhone sounds just as good as the broadcast host phone line. If I would have called her on the broadcast host, it sounded just as good. But I have a really great connection with AT&T. Now, I will tell you that a lot of people don't have the best of connections with their cell phones, especially there are some people that are, they walk outside of their home, they can get a connection, but man, inside they can't even make a phone call with their cell phone. So there's a lot of people who using a cell phone to do telephone interviews probably is not going to be the best solution for them. And so therefore it may come down to either one of the other two solutions that I mentioned previously, or the broadcast host being, that last option. And I do tell my clients that is a last option. It's a kind of a last resort because it's an option that costs, $459 plus a couple cables to get it all hooked up and stuff like that. So anyway, I just thought I would share this with you, and I thought it was very interesting. Now, Daniel Lewis heard that I was going to talk about this because after I stopped recording, those who were in the live show last week, I didn't, during the post show over at gspn.tv/live, you can join the chat room and stuff like that. After I hit stop on the recording last week, I went ahead and told them how, what I was going to share with you today. And so Daniel called in this feedback.
Hi, Cliff. This is Daniel from theRamenNoodle.com. And you had mentioned last week in Podcast Answer Man an incredible solution that you discovered for connecting a phone to a mixer without having to use a broadcast host. And I've been meaning to tell you about this, but I've also discovered something too. And based on the post show that was last week, I think that this might even be a little bit better of a solution. And that is, I think this will work on almost any wireless phone. Instead of just using a regular stereo cable, what I did is I went to monoprice.com and bought an iPod audio video cable. So the plug looks like a stereo plug, but it has an extra loop around it. And then on the other end, instead of having just the red and white RCA plugs, it has red, white, and yellow. It's intended to be for iPods to connect to a TV for video. But I discovered with my BlackBerry Curve, I can plug it into the headphone jack of my BlackBerry Curve, plug in the red and white into the left and right of my mixer inputs, and then plug the yellow line into my mixer's output and do a mix minus just like you do with Skype. The result is that people on the phone can hear anything that comes through my mixer. And I can hear them because they're coming through my mixer too. So it's doing a complete mix minus with the phone instead of the solution that you had mentioned where just connecting a stereo cable. Yeah, that works too, but the issue with that is that then the people on the phone can't hear your sound effects, your co-hosts, your audio clips, your music, anything that's coming through the mixer. They can only hear it through the phone. So this, I think, would be a solution for that. The cable that I bought was $2 to replace the broadcast host. I think that's a pretty good deal. Thanks. I hope that you find this useful and can fit this in with the show.
All right, Daniel, thank you so much. And that, of course, is the other concern that I had was, of course, I like the fact that when I'm doing a telephone interview, for example, last week I told you about my perfect interview that just went flawlessly, in my opinion. I basically had one of our callers call in and leave a voicemail, much in the same way that Daniel just did. And that person was asking a question because he knew in advance that, I was going to be interviewing these individuals. And so my folks on the phone, the people I were interviewing on the phone, they actually heard the question as I was playing it. And so it was nice to be able to send that back. And the broadcast host allows me to do that. Now, Daniel, I went and pulled out, I have one of those cables, by the way, and I went and pulled it out. Now, I will say this, that I've actually had a problem with my iPhone 3G where even the microphone on my iPhone is giving me a little bit of a fit here and there. So I was not able to get it to work with the cable. Now, I will say this, on the iPhone, Apple did something really stupid. They probably considered themselves brilliant, but they make their own cable for this. And it's really no different than the cable that you're talking about. It's got the, it's not a tip ring. It's like tip ring sleeve plus an additional little sleeve action happening on the 1/8" jack. And you plug that into your iPhone, and then it's got the 3 RCAs on the other end. And of course, it's typically, you've got white and red, and that's, white is for your left channel of audio, right is for your right channel of audio, and yellow RCA is for video. Now, I do know for a fact that this is no different than the actual official cable that you can buy from Apple for, I don't know, they probably sell it for $30 or something. Anyway, the only thing that's different is yellow is definitely one of the audio channels, and I can't remember which one it is the quote unquote video channel to go out to your TV, but it's either the red or the white. I can't remember which one right now. But they just switched it, and it's really stupid. But you can still use these very inexpensive cables. Now, I did try to send the audio out from my aux send on my mixer into the microphone, but like I said, I have a little problem. I've got like a little short in my iPhone's headphone jack where you plug in the little cable there. So I can't confirm to you right now whether or not that works, but if it does, that is even more amazing, because then you have the ability to do the full mix minus, and that's awesome. And again, you're right. $2 versus a $459 piece of equipment for the broadcast host. Absolutely. And if that can work out for my clients, I would much rather have them do that. And you know why? I'd much rather save them $459, because at $150 an hour, that means they can hire me to consult with them more and to teach them how to do wonderful things like this. So anyway, I just want to say thank you for all of that feedback. And again, this is a shorter show this week, but wow, this is, in my mind, this is an episode that brings a lot of value. And so if you have an iPhone 3G, an iPhone 3GS, and obviously Daniel says it works for him on the BlackBerry Curve, I'm sure that it probably works the same with the Droid and the Nexus One. The important thing here is what kind of headphone connection do you have on your cell phone and all of that other stuff. But and then of course in the chat room somebody's saying I think there may even be a fifth solution. And if anybody wants to call in additional solutions, 859-795-4067 is the voicemail feedback hotline for Podcast Answer Man and all the other shows I produce here at gspn.tv. I just want to say, it's a true privilege and honor to have each and every one of you subscribing to this show. I did something I don't do very often. I was peeking at the stats, and you guys are telling other people about the show, and I thank you for that. Also, want to let you know, very special webinar happening this Saturday. You got to get on this one as quick as possible. Go to podcastanswerman.com. There's a WordPress Q&A session happening this weekend. I'm doing a WordPress Q&A webinar where you get to help determine what we're going to cover during the webinar. And it's a 2-hour session. The cost is $100, and there's still a few spots open. You can see the list of questions that are already being asked, and of course, there's more details about that. And if you haven't been getting notifications about the upcoming webinars and all the other things, then you want to get on the mailing list over at podcastanswerman.com/mailing list. And that's pretty much all I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here and say thank you for subscribing, and we'll talk to you next time. Until then, join the community.